With the release of Alien Romulus, it's time that we rank the Alien films in the franchise. Like, subscribe, comment down below, and tell a friend if you haven't. And if you're new here, check out the rest of the channel and let me know what you think. Let's dive into the ranking of the Alien franchise. I did just want to quickly mention before we get started that in this ranking we are only going to be focusing on the movies in the mainline franchise. I know there's AVP and AVP Requiem, but as far as I can tell, it's kind of a debate online whether or not those are actually included in this franchise or if they're their own thing. And I really don't care because both those movies are trash anyway and I don't want to talk about them, so today it's just going to be Alien 1 through Alien Romulus. So let's get started. Coming in at last place at number 7 is Alien Resurrection. This movie is bad. It's just pretty much all around awful. Bringing back Sigourney Weaver, I guess, was a good idea. Kind of just like a Hail Mary for this franchise at this point. Sigourney Weaver's good as always. They keep paying her money to come back, even though she doesn't seem like she really wants to come back. The rest of the cast is good, although I think Winona Ryder is the weakest of the synthetics in this franchise, to be honest. And the movie's just kind of hokey and doesn't really have its own style or tone. And I think that's mostly due to the fact that Joss Whedon wrote this movie, who I don't really care for. I enjoyed his work on the first two Avengers, but he can just be a little too campy for me. Oh, and I did want to mention real quick, in my review of Romulus the other day, I said that that was the first time that we saw an alien-human hybrid, and I forgot about this one because this whole movie is pretty forgettable. In at number 6 is Alien 3. Now, honestly, I just saw this movie for the first time about a week or so ago, and I dropped a review for it before Romulus on my channel, so go and check that out if you haven't. And I gotta say, the saving grace of this movie is the fact that David Fincher directed it. And I feel terrible for him because this movie is bad. It is so boring. I know the first Alien film is kind of a slow burn sci-fi horror, but I love that movie. This movie just doesn't really go anywhere. There's not that many interesting details. It doesn't add much to the lore. I think the base premise is interesting, having Ridley on a planet with an all-male population and an alien coming after them. They could have some interesting interactions and scenes with that, but they don't really do much, and it just feels empty. At number 5 is Alien Covenant. I like the bones of this story, continuing David's story from Prometheus and building off of that, the whole idea of this existential thread that crosses through these two prequel movies and the idea of us coming from ancient alien civilizations and David being the pseudo-creator of this alien race. I find all that fascinating. Michael Fassbender is as good as he's ever been in this film, playing a dual role. He's incredible. Danny McBride gives a serious turn, which is very enjoyable. I like his character a lot. Visually, I think this is one of the more impressive films in this franchise. It's up there with Prometheus and Romulus to me, from a cinematography and just visual standpoint. But man, the rest of the characters in this movie are so stupid. It's just constant dumb decision after dumb decision. Just even when they land on the planet, they're like, oh, the air is breathable, but they don't even put on suits in case there's any kind of, airborne virus that they don't know about. And yeah, I know in some of these movies, the characters make really dumb decisions and they're supposed to be highly trained astronauts and Marines and etc. But a lot of the times, the plot makes up for those decisions to where you don't really notice them. Covenant is not one of those. The cast and the characters they play in this movie is miserable. I also feel like Catherine Waterston's lead in this movie is the least interesting and compelling of the female leads of this franchise. And we can't forget that this movie cast James Franco as a 2-second cameo before he burned up in his pod and didn't even really make an appearance on screen. aside from that marketing clip before the movie was released. It's just weird. Like, say what you will about Franco and his controversies the past, 10 years or whatever. I'm not saying I agree with the guy, but he is a very talented actor. And at the time, he was kind of riding high on the biggest momentum of his career. And you had him and you didn't cast him in a bigger role. This movie's just odd. There's a lot of odd decisions in this movie. It's pretty mediocre. I enjoy it, but it's not great. At number 4, we have Aliens. And yes, I know this is some people's second favorite or favorite of the franchise. And it's highly regarded as one of the best sequels of all time. And I enjoy it, but it's just not for me. I'm not the biggest fan of these 80s style action movies. And this movie is fun. It is a lot of fun. I like the genre change from the first movie. It was a surprising deviation from the original source material. And Weaver's awesome in it. The cast is good. The effects are very innovative. That's one thing James Cameron has kind of been a champion of his whole career. He always pushes the boundaries with effects, and I respect him for that. That being said, I think he's a very overrated director. I think his stories always kind of lack substance, and this is one of them. I mean, this story in this film isn't really anything, overly compelling. It's an action movie, which is fine. It's enjoyable. And the characters overact a lot, the cast that plays them, which, happens a lot in Cameron films. And the dialogue is very, very corny. Very 80s action movie corny, like James Cameron likes. I understand why a lot of people like this movie. It's fun. It's just not my cup of tea. At number 3, we have the latest installment in this franchise, alienromulus. I really enjoyed this film. It was one of my most anticipated of the year, and it definitely exceeded my expectations. I think Fede Alvarez was the right man for the job in helming this project. I mean, visually, this movie is stunning. He did a lot with practical effects. Even the CGI that they did utilize looks very, very good. And there's a lot of unique and creative action sequences. The cast is awesome, especially David Johnson as Andy. He's probably one of my favorite synthetics outside of Fassbender in this franchise. And they found a way to thread in a lot of the lore from the prequel movies, which weren't as highly regarded, into this film. And they did it in a way that didn't feel forced, and it just felt organic. And I just really enjoyed this movie. Some people are going to hate this, but in at number 2 is Prometheus. And look, this movie has problems. Again, with the stupid way that some of these characters progress through this film, and they're supposed to be experts in their field, I get it. There's a lot of dumb decisions made. It's a thing in these movies. We just got to move past it. And I think Prometheus is easier to move past because of the themes of this film. I always enjoy when sci-fi movies, especially ones that take place in space and beyond our everyday universe, try to tackle big existential questions. Who we are, where do we come from, what makes us human, what is creation, what if we became gods ourselves and started to create, what would that look like? And I think Prometheus does a very compelling job at just exploring those themes with David and Shaw's spirituality, and I just enjoy that aspect of it. And I think it also helps with the world building aspect of this franchise. I mean, before this movie, it was a straight up pretty horror action heavy franchise with really no backbone. They were fun movies. I think what Prometheus does is it just expands on the lore of this universe and creates something a little different and for the better. Not to mention, the cast in this film is great. I mean, you have Idris Elba, you have Noomi Rapace playing Shaw, you have Michael Fassbender, obviously one of my favorite actors, Charlize Theron, Guy Pearce. I mean, the cast is great, and Shaw probably is my second favorite female lead in this universe, and it's a real shame we didn't get her back for Covenant because she was a standout in this film. Visually, I think this might be the most visually striking film in this franchise. I mean, this film is beautiful, and the action set pieces are a lot of fun. And of course, in at number 1, the Ridley Scott classic Alien. This movie is just fantastic. I mean, it's a classic for a reason. It is a quintessential classic horror movie. I'm not the biggest horror genre film. I do like a lot of them. But I feel like if you're someone who's very into horror or someone that's starting to get into horror, this is kind of one of the movies that you start with. I mean, it is a slow burn, so I understand why some people don't like it, but man, it's claustrophobic, it's grimy, it's gross, it's just close quarters horror at its best. And it's so creepy. And the cast is so good. And Sigourney Weaver, obviously the standout. She came back for 4 movies in this franchise. She's incredible. And Ash, one of the better synthetics in this franchise. And we get the first look at when a synthetic turns on the main crew, which becomes a recurring theme in this film. Although I have not film, but franchise, and I have enjoyed how we have gotten some actually good-hearted synthetics down the line. So it doesn't become this tiring, recurring theme. But this movie's great. The inventive design of the alien itself, I mean, there had been nothing like this seen before, really. And just visually, this movie is fantastic as well, especially just coming from 1979. So much of this holds up. The practical effects that Scott and his team put together, it is chef's kisses. This truly is not just a classic horror movie or classic sci-fi movie. I think it's one of the more compelling and enjoyable classics in cinema history. So that's it. That's our ranking of the 7 movies in the Alien franchise. Let me know what you think down below, and I hope to see you in the next video.